And I told Ali before everyone is on, but I just want to let you guys know that there won't be a countdown tonight. So we'll go live in a few seconds. I don't know. He said 7:59:50. I don't have a second watch with me, but
so I'll just give it a 5 count and then start.
Yeah, as soon as you guys are ready, you'll be live. So.
All right.
Well, obviously, like at least a minute from now. But
is there a target date for being like live for reals?
That's the question, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think Ali was saying September.
Yeah, I think the goal was to go live in September. If you can just give me a second, Chair Samutzi, I'm having trouble with accessing the script here.
Ali, it's in the wrong folder, by the way, if you're on the SharePoint. It's in the March folder for some reason.
Okay, I think I'm accessing the one that you sent, I think.
Okay.
Just looking to make sure it's the most current one. Okay, all set.
Awesome. Hello and good evening, everybody. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Planning Commission. Today is Tuesday, June 15th, 2021. This meeting is now called to order. Before we get started, I want to announce that we have a new commissioner joining us tonight for his first meeting. Welcome, Commissioner Havemann. And Commissioner Havemann, I have not had the pleasure of meeting you in person. Perhaps you could introduce yourself for the rest of the commissioners and for the audience in attendance.
Sure, I'd be delighted. Thanks very much. First, very happy to be here and to be a member of the commission. I have been a resident of San Rafael for about 20 years. I've lived all over, I guess, sort of the southern part of San Rafael, Gershel Park, downtown San Rafael, Fair Hills, Glenwood, Dominican. Now I live in La Clemont Marina. I'm an economist, professional economist. I do a lot of public speaking on the economy, on autonomous vehicles, and a lot of other important economic policy topics. I work a lot with local economic development agencies. Just very glad to be here and very much looking forward to the day when I can meet you all in person.
I think we all share that same sentiment. Thank you and welcome to the commission. We're glad to have you.
Thanks very much.
So this time I'll request staff to call out the roll call for commissioners who are present.
Sure. Commissioner Davidson?
Here.
Commissioner Havemann?
Here.
Commissioner Lubomirsky?
Here.
Commissioner Mercado? Not seeing him. Commissioner Saudi?
Here.
And Vice Chair Privatali. All right, so we got 2 absences.
All right, thank you, Ali. Next, we'll move on to the order of the agenda. Are there any changes to the order of the agenda? All right, hearing none, next we'll move on to the meeting procedures. Due to the COVID-19 shelter-in-place order, we have had to establish new ways of conducting our public meetings. I'd like to ask staff to address how public comment will work this evening.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Samutzi. So this meeting is being recorded and streamed live to YouTube, where viewers can provide comments in the live chat, or you're welcome to attend by telephone by calling 669-900-9128 and entering the meeting ID 872-0645-4435#, or comment and watch directly through the Zoom using the link on the agenda. If you're participating by phone tonight and wish to provide comments, please press *9 when the chair opens the public comment period. Once you hear the notification that the host is inviting you to speak, please press *6 and unmute yourself. You will have up to 3 minutes to speak. If you submitted comments prior to the meeting by email or letter, it has been forwarded to the Planning Commission and published to our website. I also want to let everyone know that closed captioning is available for this evening, and there is a link in the live chat now.
Thanks, Ali. Let me now describe how the meeting procedures will operate. So first we'll begin with a staff report. Then we'll hear from the applicant. The applicant will keep their presentation to no more than 10 minutes. At that point, members of the public will then be invited to speak. People on the conference call can speak when they receive the notification that they've been asked to unmute themselves. And I will ask the members of the public who are invited to unmute themselves and speak to limit their comments to 3 minutes. Then the commission will have the opportunity to ask questions of staff, the applicant, or the public after each segment. We will then close the public hearing and bring the matter back to the commission for discussion and action if necessary. At this time, if anyone has an urgent communication on a topic that's not on the agenda, you may address the commission at this time.
So again, I'd like to invite anyone who's wishing to speak to raise their hand using the raise hand feature or by pressing *9. Once you hear a notification by the host, you're going to be invited to speak. You can press *6 to unmute yourself. Let me see. Do we have anyone here? I see nobody raising their hand.
Okay, thanks. We'll now move on to the consent calendar, which has one item, which are the minutes from the March 23rd, 2021 Planning Commission meeting. And we have just the approval of the meeting minutes for that meeting, and the recommended action is to approve as submitted. Are there any comments from the public on the consent calendar?
Again, I'd like to invite anyone wishing to speak to raise their hand using the raised hand feature or by pressing *9. Once you hear the notification, you'll be invited to speak. I'll just give it a couple of seconds here to see if anybody raises their hand. And there are no raised hands.
All right. Are there any comments, edits from members of the commission? And if not, I will entertain a motion and announce yourself if you are going to make a motion or a second.
Commissioner Davidson, I move to approve the minutes as proposed.
Mr. Lubomirski is second.
Is there any discussion on this? Okay, hearing none, I will move to a roll call. Staff, could you please conduct a roll call at this time?
Sure. Commissioner Davidson?
Yes.
Commissioner Haveman?
I think I should probably abstain.
Commissioner Lubomirski?
Yes.
And Commissioner Saudi?
Yes.
And Chair Samudzi?
Yes. Okay, we'll now move on to tonight's item for public hearing. And this is the final environmental impact report for the General Plan 2040, as well as the Downtown Precise Plan.
Chair Samudzi? May I just mention that I do see Chair Mercado now in the audience or in the meeting.
All right.
So,
all right, welcome all.
Note that.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, so for our final EIR for the General Plan 2040 and Downtown Precise Plan, at this time, I'll request a staff report.
Great. Good evening, commissioners. I'm Barry Miller. I'll be delivering the staff report. I'm just going to maximize my screen here so we can walk through this. Let me just confirm that everyone can see the screen and hear me okay.
Yes, I can.
Someone, okay, thumbs up. That's good. Thank you. So we are going to have it's a three-part presentation this evening. I'm going to just have a couple of slides to introduce where we are in the process, and then I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Steve Nowak from PlaceWorks, who will walk us through the final EIR. The only item we're asking you to take action on this evening is a resolution recommending council approval of the final EIR. Then we'll have a presentation on the General Plan 2040 revisions. And following this presentation, we're going to turn it back to the commission for public comment and discussion, and then action on the resolution before you this evening. So here's our timeline, and it's been a long process. This is the process just since the release of the general plan. I want to point out that prior to that October 2020 release date, there was a 2.5-year process to develop the plan, which involved hundreds of people, 25 steering committee meetings, and a large outreach and engagement process. Many of the documents that ended up in the 2020 plan had been previously reviewed and vetted and revised based on public feedback. So we came into this with a plan in 2020 that had been pretty thoroughly vetted. That said, once we released the plan and the Planning Commission began its public hearings, we had a hearing on the first 9 chapters in October, a hearing on the next 5 chapters in November, a hearing on revisions to the plan based on public comment in December, then released the precise plan, which just focuses on the downtown area, released the EIR on January 7th for the precise plan and general plan combined, and had a 61-day review period for the EIR. Now, while that 61-day review period was going on, we had 3 public hearings on the precise plan, and those were in January and February. So the commission had a total of 7 public hearings between October and March, and on March 9th, we had the hearing on the EIR, and that was the close of the comment period. So following the close of the comment period, we had about 2 months for responses to comments and revisions to the general plan and the downtown precise plan, including the historic resources summary report, and then published the final EIR, which includes the responses to comments and revisions to the EIR. We've also published a tracked change version of the general plan that uses red line and strikeout to show every edit that's been made to the plan. The remainder of my timeline is mostly covered by the thumbnail on Zoom, but I will say that the 2 hearings that you see barely on the screen here are this hearing that we're having this evening and another hearing that we'll be having in 2 weeks on the general plan resolution and other related resolutions. So we'll get to those in a little bit. So I mentioned this evening there is 1 resolution before you, and that is to recommend approval of the final EIR to the City Council. Steve will talk a little bit more about the intent of that resolution and what it entails. Next meeting, we'll be talking about a resolution to approve the Sequa findings and the statement of overriding considerations. This is essentially a resolution that recommends the approval of the project and a finding that the benefits of the project outweigh its significant unavoidable impacts. Resolution 220104, which will be in your packet for the next meeting, will cover the adoption of the general plan. And again, these are recommendations to the City Council for their action, since the Commission's authority in this matter is to make recommendations to the City Council. There's also a resolution that will be coming to you to recommend approval of the downtown precise plan. And then finally, a recommendation to recommend zoning amendments, a resolution to recommend zoning amendments that are required to implement the precise plan. And those cover both the elimination and rescindment of certain provisions of the zoning code, and then the adoption of the new form-based code and other miscellaneous zoning amendments. So we'll walk you through those at the next meeting. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve, who will give you a description of the final EIR. And Steve, I will turn it over to you at this point.
Okay, thank you, Barry. I have to say that this is a big milestone. Very happy to be here tonight and see the project moving forward this way. Excuse me, I do have a little bit of a sore throat, so bear with me here. So I'm going to provide just a brief overview of the California Environmental Quality Act. It's the state's primary environmental protection law. It's an informational document that discloses the potential impacts of a project where there may be a potential for a physical effect on the environment. It identifies mitigation measures and describes feasible alternatives to the proposed project to avoid impacts. Sequa does not dictate project approval or denial. It truly is a disclosure document. Next slide. The EIR before you is a program level EIR, and a program level EIR, they're appropriate when a project consists of a series of actions related to the issuance of rules, regulations, and other planning criteria. And of course, the general plan fits within this guideline, and this is really intended for general plans in many ways. The EIR doesn't evaluate impacts of future construction level projects, even if they are consistent with the general plan. And general plan consistency is important in terms of streamlining future environmental review. but the document does allow subsequent project level environmental review for future development to tier off the program EIR. And it also helps to streamline future environmental review procedures. And I'll talk a little more detail about that in one moment. Next slide. When an EIR addresses an environmental impact where a significant impact is identified, it's required under Sequa that it either be avoided, minimized, rectified, reduced, or eliminated, or compensated. And, you know, in this case, Sequa permits the general plan to incorporate mitigation measures as goals and policies and actions that are designed to protect, preserve, and enhance environmental resources. This is really a feedback loop. And in the case of San Rafael, you have an EIR that's really recommending new and robust general plan programs that are really designed to let future developers know what the blueprint is in the city and what the guidelines are. And it really goes a long way to streamlining future projects, but still making sure that they meet the city's high standards. Next slide, please, Barry. So the EIR looked at pretty much the full range of topics that are included within the Sequa Appendix G guidelines. In this case, most impacts were found to either be no impact or less than significant with mitigation. There were a few areas where the EIR did find significant and unavoidable impacts. Those included air quality, cultural and tribal cultural resources, greenhouse gas emissions, and transportation. Next slide. And so because of those significant and unavoidable impacts, part of the adoption process includes adopting what's called a statement of overriding considerations. The city may approve the project with the known significant and unavoidable impacts through a statement of overriding considerations. And that document, it identifies how the benefits of the project, including social and economic benefits, outweigh the potential adverse environmental effects. In the case, as I'll show in a minute, in the case of this document, many of the impacts were just due to the programmatic nature of the review itself. Anyway, the statement of overriding considerations must be included in the record of project approval. So it really is as part of the whole overall approval process. Next slide. So the impacts that were found to be significant and unavoidable included 2 air quality impacts. And both of them had to do with the inability to really determine the exact impacts from future development. So it's really at a programmatic level, it's difficult to determine what the impacts would be. And this has to do both with criteria air pollutants as well as potential toxic air effects due to construction or roadway operations. Next slide. In the area of cultural resource, it was just found that, again, the uncertainty of development, it was difficult to determine what the impact would be on historic resources. Next slide. And finally, a third impact is in the area of greenhouse gas emissions. And this is really one that's a statewide issue at this point. This really addresses the inability due to technology and current modeling to demonstrate the ability to reduce impacts under Executive Order S0305. Next slide. Transportation found significant unavoidable impacts due to potential VMT increase as a result of the projected growth in the EIR itself. And it also found that implementation of the proposed project would result in a significant roadway network VMT impact due to the capacity of the roadway system. And this has to do with, again, the uncertainty of travel modes, the increase in single ride on-demand vehicles, etc. And finally, the similar impacts were found on a cumulative level because the impacts were also found to be significant and unavoidable on a cumulative level. Next slide. So the resolution before you tonight includes the following bullets, and I'm going to read them so everybody's clear of what the content includes. It finds that the EIR has been prepared in accordance with Sequa. The EIR follows appropriate format, content, technical analysis, and consideration of alternatives, and followed all noticing requirements. The EIR information is current and correct. No new information has been added that would result in new impacts or increased severity of impacts. The Commission has considered public comments. Mitigation measures have been included to lessen, eliminate, or avoid impacts. And the FEIR is an informational document and will be reviewed when future actions are taken. And then finally, findings will be made to support the statement of overriding considerations. Lastly, at the request of Sustainable San Rafael, in response to the significant and unavoidable impact with regard to greenhouse gas emissions, the following is added to the resolution. Whereas the city is committed to vigorous implementation of all programs it considers necessary to lessen impacts found to be significant and unavoidable, including the implementation of its climate change action plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in order to achieve or exceed state climate goals.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank
and
you.
Just to clarify, this clause that's underlined here is going to be inserted in the resolution. So we're going to ask that when you adopt the resolution this evening, or when I should say when you vote on the resolution this evening, that it includes this amendment that adds this language, which responds to the comment letter that we received from Sustainable San Rafael. And we'll also be adding language to the statement of overriding considerations resolution that speaks more specifically to the points raised in their letter. So I'm going to go through the revisions to General Plan 2040. I'm going to do this pretty quickly and at a kind of a high level, just because it's a lot of content and we want to keep it brief so that we can spend most of our time on discussion. And just again, to recap, we received letters and emails on the general plan following its release in October. There was testimony provided by the public at commission hearings. The commission itself did a deep dive through the plan. You went through each element of the plan and spoke about some of the policy recommendations and provided some clear direction to staff. There were also changes that were needed because of changes made to the precise plan. The EIR comment letters, many of those addressed general plan policies and programs. And so there were some changes to the general plan that came from that process, and EIR mitigation measures. So Steve mentioned that there were significant impacts or potential significant impacts that were identified in the EIR, and some of those were mitigated by adding specific policies and programs to the general plan. So all of those have been incorporated in track changes in the general plan revisions. Finally, there were some staff edits, corrections, and clarifications that were made to some of the maps and to some of the policies and programs, things like typos and formatting issues and so on. Again, I'm not going to go through all of this. It's kind of a overall list of the commenters on the general plan, both through letters, emails, and then general plan EIR comments that were pertinent to the general plan itself. And again, the Planning Commission review, we highlighted the topics that were covered at each of your meetings, and going all the way back actually to September, before the plan was even released, we had an informational session with the commission to walk you through the document and received feedback then. So there were at least 6 occasions at which the commission discussed the general plan and provided feedback to staff. This isn't meant to be actually interpreted, but this is just an illustration that on the left, you see we prepared written responses to each of the comments that were received. So every comment that was made in a letter or orally was captured, annotated, and then there was a response that was prepared indicating how the general plan might be changed to respond to the comment. Those were actually all put together in a single spreadsheet and sorted by page number so that we were able to kind of have a roadmap, which is what you see on the right, for editing the general plan. So there's kind of a working document that goes comment by comment through I think there are 550 comments in this spreadsheet that were responded to in the revisions. And I'm just going to go quickly through the elements of the plan, not one by one, but we've kind of grouped them together to provide some highlights of the changes that were made between the October draft and the May draft. In the front section of the plan, on the back side of the title page, we've included a land acknowledgement statement, which recognizes and acknowledges the Ohlone heritage of San Rafael and Marin County. We've added a diagram at the request of the Planning Commission, which you see excerpted here on the right. We're calling this the family of plans diagram. And this was a comment that was made by the commission of how does the general plan relate to the other planning documents that the city uses. So we have the system plans and the area plans and strategic plans and implementation tools. This illustrates how that all fits together. There's also a very strong call to action to prepare an equitable economic development strategy, something that the commission again felt was really important and missing from the current document. This kind of connecting the dots is a separate issue, but I'll come back to the economic development strategy in a later slide on the economic vitality element. Connecting the dots here in this context on the slide is really showing how that Chapter 2 content informs the later elements of the plan. So we've highlighted the forces driving change in San Rafael, and those shape the elements of the general plan. This is really a key to how that happens. So these diagrams are both included in the document now. We've edited the land use element to talk about the repurposing of vacant office and commercial space with housing. The opportunities for doing that are recognized, to further acknowledge the tension between growth and development, which is really inherent throughout the general plan, but not explicitly acknowledged. So we talk about that a little bit more. We talk about the importance of open space for wildlife and habitat, a little bit of clarifying language around the density bonus issue. In the neighborhoods element, both the West End Neighborhood Association and the Terra Linda Homeowners Association provided us with some supplemental text, which we've incorporated. We've made some edits to the text on canalways and Northgate in response to public comment, and a few minor changes to the text on the rock quarry based on feedback from the quarry owners. In the community design and preservation element, a lot of the revisions relate to historic preservation. I do want to point out that we also strengthened the tree preservation language. This particularly deals with street trees and trees on public property. There are a number of new historic preservation programs that have been included in response to comment letters from San Rafael Heritage. There are some new EIR mitigation measures that we've incorporated that deal with archaeological resources. And the Historic Resources Survey and Summary Report, which is a technical appendix to the downtown plan and the EIR, was extensively revised. And if there are questions about that, I can respond to those later, but there was a third-party review of the survey that was done. We got very detailed comments from San Rafael Heritage and did a lot of follow-up to again, field check and correct some of the information that was in the initial report. So that's all been handled through a revision to that report. In the conservation and climate change document, there were some revisions made to the wetlands policies in response to public comment. There were quite a few mitigation measures in the EIR that dealt with biological resources that we've included, dealing with wildlife and birds. And then there were mitigation measures dealing with air quality and greenhouse gas emissions that are also covered in that element, including stronger language on the electrification of building systems and updates to the Climate Change Action Plan, which is that CCAP acronym. In the safety and noise elements, we received public comment on the geotechnical requirements and hazards. Those have been incorporated. There were some clarifications to the noise standards that were requested. There were Sequa mitigation measures that were in the EIR that related to development on sites with hazardous material, cleanup issues, or where the issues have been resolved, but there might be future development. And there were some Sequa mitigation measures related to construction noise and vibration that resulted in new programs being added to that element of the general plan. In the mobility element, which deals with transportation, we added some additional data in response to public comment from Responsible Growth in Marin. We added a discussion of the Regional Congestion Management Program at the request of the Transportation Authority of Marin, updated the text on the Transportation Analysis Guidelines. There was a Sequa mitigation measure in the EIR that dealt with trip reduction that was included, and we strengthened the language in that element on zero emission vehicles and electric vehicle charging stations. In community services and infrastructure, there's language on childcare facilities that's been strengthened, particularly with respect to planning for new libraries and strengthening of the standards for fire protection, really just referencing National Fire Protection Agency standards, and then updated text on the current drought state of emergency and stronger language or more mandatory language relating to community composting that's been included in that element. In the economic vitality element, the Commission will recall that there was extensive discussion about this conflict between some of the city's equity goals and its economic development goals and its fiscal stability goals. We see that pointing to the need for an economic development strategy for the city. I think there's concurrence that this is a high priority item. It needs to happen right after the general plan is adopted, and that may result in some future plan amendments. We also acknowledge, I think, in this section that the general plan is really intended to be a 20-year land use plan at its core, and so we're limited in how deep we can dive into the economic vitality issues in the context of a general plan. But we really see that as an important follow-up item to really look at economic development issues in the city and what is the future of our economy. In the new equity, diversity, and inclusion element, which is a brand new element of the plan, we've added text at the Commission's request, emphasizing the diversity of the local population, the racial and social justice movement. We've acknowledged and recognized the LGBTQ community and the need for sanctioned space for public expression. Mental health services are acknowledged, and also we've added program language to encourage and require connecting the canal area to the rest of the city. I also want to add that we took a close look at this issue of shoulds versus shalls throughout the plan and this balance between whether a policy and program is advisory or mandatory. There were several policies that were strengthened by changing the shoulds to shalls. We were, I would say, pretty judicious in our use in our changes. Again, this is meant to be a flexible document. The appendices to the plan have all been added. So if you go to sanrafael2040.org, you'll find this complete list of appendices A through J populated with documents. So these are all now in place, and they provide background information and technical information on things like sea level rise, the noise contour diagrams, the transportation data that was collected through the process, and so on. Appendix A, I wanted to highlight this because one of the comments we got from the Planning Commission is that we needed to incorporate metrics into the general plan and be more specific about how we would implement this. I think you've seen this diagram at a previous meeting. We have done this for every program in the general plan, and there are nearly 900 of them, identifying when they happen, the responsible agency or department, the resources available, and which of the 6 guiding principles they advance. We've also developed metrics. Gotta get my metrics and matrix straight here. The metrics are identified for each element, and those are being incorporated now into the beginning of each of these implementation matrices. We're not going to go through the downtown precise plan revisions at this meeting. We're going to have a discussion about that at the next meeting, but this is just a highlight of the major changes that were made to the downtown precise plan. This is still being finalized, but there were comments that were made about calculating height on sloped sites, density bonuses, improving 4th Street as a pedestrian space, stronger requirements for solar access studies, and then a series of recommendations on the historic buildings inventory and the standards for historic properties and buildings adjacent to historic properties. So those have all been incorporated in a revised precise plan. We've also identified all of the conforming amendments that need to be made to the municipal code. And if you can think about this as we're adopting a new zoning code for downtown through the form-based code in the precise plan. And in order to do that, we first have to rescind all the existing zones for downtown. There are unique zoning districts that apply in downtown San Rafael today that have to be rescinded before we can adopt the new form-based code. So those code amendments have been completed, and are attached to a resolution that you'll be looking at the next meeting. Those changes are made by ordinance rather than resolution. So the commission will be acting on a resolution recommending council approval of ordinances that make these changes. So this is the last slide, and we're available for clarifying questions right after the presentation. We'd like you to consider public comment on the final EIR and the general plan. I do want to point out we received written correspondence from Victoria DeWitt that was sent out today. We also received an email from Stacy Clements seconding Victoria DeWitt's email and asking that be acknowledged. The commission can then discuss the changes and the final EIR, and then we're asking that you take action on the resolution and continue the hearing. And I apologize for the fast talking in this presentation. We had a lot of content to get through and wanted to make sure that we provided enough time for your discussion. So with that, I'll turn it back to the chair for follow-up. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Barry. Thanks for the comprehensive report. At this point, I'm going to turn to my fellow commissioners. I'm going to ask for questions of Barry, staff, or consulting team. And I just want to be a reminder to keep the questions at this point as just clarifying questions. We'll have further discussion after we have the public hearing. So any clarifying questions from commissioners?
I have one question, Barry. There was a lot of discussion on the canalways. That property has been long looked at by the city, and now some nonprofits for potential housing development. And I noticed that you mentioned there were some edits on the canalways. I don't remember seeing or finding that the zoning got changed for that property. So what were the edits, if you recall?
Okay, thanks for asking. It's a great question. There were no changes to the map, to the land use map related to canalways.
Okay.
The changes were to the text. And there had been a statement in the previous version that said that future development should be economically viable for the property owners. And Marin Autobahn objected to that language, and we've deleted that statement. That's not to say that it may still not be true. That, you know, I think for the owner's sake, they may still want economically viable development. But it is not explicitly stated in the general plan that is the city's objective for the site. The other change we made is we acknowledged the work that's been done over the last 40 plus years to create open space on that property, or retain open space on that property by various conservation groups, which hadn't really been acknowledged in the previous iteration. So we've edited the document mainly to incorporate the feedback from Marin Autobahn.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Yeah, Commissioner Haveman. I think you're on mute.
I should do have a quick question about the statement of overriding considerations. Does that currently exist? Is that part of the EIR, or is that still forthcoming?
It's a separate document. It goes along with the resolution, and it's in process right now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no other questions, I'm going to open the public hearing, and I'll ask staff to open up public comments.
Thank you, Chair. So again, to comment on Zoom, you can go ahead and use the raise hand feature to raise your hand. And if you're commenting by phone, this is the time you would press *9. And once you hear the notification inviting you to speak, you're going to press *6 to unmute yourself. So I'll just give it a couple of seconds here. It looks like I see some hands going up. So I'm going to go ahead and start. go ahead and unmute yourself. There you go.
Hi, good evening. This is Bill Carney. I'm Chair of Sustainable San Rafael. The fact that this final EIR continues to find the greenhouse gas impacts of General Plan 2040 to be, quote, significant and unavoidable raises a major red flag that San Rafael must redouble its efforts to reduce climate change. Contrary to the report's contention, we believe these greenhouse gas impacts are not unavoidable. The technologies needed to reach the necessary local emission reductions are readily available and affordable in all of the emission sectors that the FEIR lists. By implementing low emission building electrification, transportation, and organic waste programs early in this decade, the city can and must achieve the targeted 60% reduction of greenhouse gases over the 20-year term of the general plan for both existing and for new development, placing San Rafael on a solid trajectory towards carbon neutral. What's needed is the city's firm commitment to implement greenhouse gas solutions that it's already identified. To that end, we request that you and staff include the language we've submitted where appropriate in the final EIR certification resolution that you're considering tonight, and also in subsequent related resolutions. That language reads in part, quote, that notwithstanding any finding of overriding consideration relative to greenhouse gas reductions, the city shall continue to vigorously implement all programs it considers necessary to achieve or exceed state greenhouse gas goals. With such a commitment from the city, we continue to support General Plan 2040 as a viable blueprint for a sustainable future. Thank you.
Hi, this is Victoria DeWitt, and I'd like to just comment on some of my comments on my latest letter. I think it's my 6th letter. Anyway, LU 2.6 lot consolidation. I think it's important to mention hillside lots. Historically, many of these small lots were created over 100 years ago, and they have to be combined in order to come up with a reasonable development size. And so I think it should be included in the discussion on lot consolidation. The LU 2.6A, where it says that they may allow reduced parking for small lot consolidations, I think there needs to be added that as long as it doesn't impede emergency vehicle access by reducing that allowable parking. And accessory dwelling units, LU 2-12D, I added except where access difficulties for fire and emergency vehicles pose risk to the public health and safety. That's actually provided for in the state law, and it's also what has been provided for in the proposed ADU ordinance that San Rafael is currently providing. So I think that should be in sync with everything else that's being done. And then Chapter 4 on the neighborhoods, the West End neighborhood, I wanted to correct some things that were changed from the corrections that we made to that description. The bicycle safety improvements should be along 2nd Street, not in the West End Village. It is literally along 2nd Street, which is my understanding that is part of the West End neighborhood, is at 2nd Street, those houses along there. So I think that needs to be changed back to say 2nd Street. And also the medians are on 2nd Street that we're referencing. And then the tree removal and replacement. Our neighborhood is very much supportive of the city adopting a tree protection or tree preservation ordinance. I think it said to revise. I don't know what is currently existing that you would revise. I think the city needs to adopt a tree ordinance. So, and then what else have I got here? And then pathway improvements, the Grove Hill Estates public pedestrian path from the West End over to Sun Valley. That's been something on the books since 1983. We really like to see that included and specified in the group of projects to be done. And what else do I have? I think that's about it. Most of it's self-explanatory. The geotechnical review matrix, I would like to see some reference back to the hillside development standards, since they sort of work together on new development. So that's all. Thank you very much.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I'm Belle Cole with OFA Marin and here in San Rafael. And I'm going to just back up the points that Bill Carney made about the EIR, and that significant greenhouse gas impacts are avoidable if we adopt ordinances now to implement the three pathways that he mentioned. This will allow us to transition off of fossil fuels in three sectors, emitting the most GHG over the next 20 years, the term of the plan. That means that the new housing and other development envisaged by the plan, as well as already existing development, would help decrease GHG instead of adding to it. Let me give you an example, and I'm going to talk about the waste area because it's what I know about. A great deal would be, a great start would be enacting a mandatory waste organics recycling ordinance that codifies the requirements and timeliness of state mandates, SB 1383 and AB 1826, and incorporates those requirements into the city's waste franchise agreement. And the biomass recovery study, which I lead, also holds great promise for finally achieving a circular economy of organic recovery in Marin. We're pleased to see that the general plan includes similar approaches. So we can reduce GHG dramatically, but it needs strong city leadership to make it happen. So we want to just show that leadership by adapting the resolution language suggesting by about Sustainable San Rafael. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Barbara Salzman, and I first wanted to say that we appreciate the changes that were made in the document, particularly the ones related to canalways. That's such an important site, and you may have some requests to change it back, but we hope you don't. And I just wanted to, I have not had sufficient time to really go over this very thoroughly, but I did want to make a few comments on a few of the things that were not done. One was the tree situation that was mentioned by Victoria, and we're especially concerned that, and as far as I could see, redwoods are not included, and they're such an important tree, not only for sequestration, carbon sequestration, but also for habitat for special status northern spotted owls. And then a few comments on wetlands. There were a number of responses to our comments that talked about the components of the policies were in the General Plan 2020. Well, you know, that doesn't mean General Plan 2020 was up to date, was valid by current standards. So you know, we thought that more analysis than that should have been provided. Also, there were some comments about, well, basically not having a taking. We certainly understand that if protection of wetlands would result in a taking, that would be understandable and valid. That's not the response that was given to us, however. It was mostly regarding these policies were in existence before. One of them, for example, talks about if it's not practical to protect the wetlands. Well, I don't think practicality should come into play here. It is a legal matter, and if it prevents a person from developing anything on their property, that's understandable. But other kinds of nuances don't cut it for us. And lastly, with regard to the wetlands zone versus the Baylands corridor, which we had, the wetlands overlay zone, which you had from last time too, versus the Baylands corridor, which we had suggested based on the countywide plan policies and program for the Baylands corridor. The difference is the Baylands corridor is more protective because it's based on historic wetland locations. It's not based on current wetlands. And the overlay zone is based on current wetlands, which may be different. So, or most likely not as protective. So, and I would hope that you would look at some of these points. I have to leave and go to the MFWD meeting because they're talking about water restrictions tonight. And I wanted to comment on that too. So I was wondering if there is a way to, if it's it isn't really too late. We may be submitting some more detailed comments if, as we further review the document, although I guess you're voting on it tonight. That's my comments.
Hi, my name is Leslie Simons. I just want to concur with Victoria DeWitt that heritage trees do need an ordinance. My mother was fighting for this 30 years ago and it still hasn't happened. Please consider that. Thank you.
Sorry, I was just talking. I do not see any additional hands.
Okay, then. At this time, I'm going to close the public hearing, and I appreciate the comments from the public. That gives us a lot of fruit for discussion. So at this point, I'm going to call on the commissioners to ask follow-up questions of staff. I think at this point, we can just kind of make it a free-for-all. What I'll do in terms of structure is just we can start by asking either follow-up questions, include any comments or thoughts if you have any, and then I'll do a wrap-up where I'll just go one by one, and we can have final wrap-up thoughts. So I think at this point, have at it.
Commissioner Smitsy, I'll go ahead and start if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've heard, I was reading the letters that we got ahead of this meeting, the concerns about some of the greenhouse gas standards, and they came up several times. So it'd be good to hear how the consultants and the staff came up with the language, and just trying to get a 360 view on where the information, like what the facts that you were able to see and where that brought the language and how it really relates to the comments that we've been getting.
Sure, I'd be happy to address that. I guess one thing that's really important is to make sure, if you do look at the mitigation measure that is part of this significant and unavoidable detail, it's extremely detailed in terms of all recognizing all of the implementation measures, as well as new programs that the city is looking at. So it really presents a very robust argument for all of the very positive things that the city is doing. And that's certainly acknowledged in the analysis as well. The real challenge here is the bill that I referenced. Let me just find it real. Senate Bill 32. I'm sorry, Executive Order S0305. That is seeking a reduction of 60% from 1990 levels by 2050 of greenhouse gas emissions. And so really, it's looking at the fact that there is no plan in place at the state level to filter down to really look at ways to achieve that. And there are many different reasons for that. Primarily is technology, and primarily is just the inability to project that far in the future. So it's actually it's a finding with all the information that the city has provided, and even beefing up their plans and programs as a result of the comments on the EIR. It's just one that I don't think any community could find to be in compliance with in a demonstrated way using scientific evidence. So that's really what it boils down to, but it certainly is no intent does it slight all the great efforts that the city is really doing on its own to address greenhouse gas emissions and reduce impacts.
Yeah, and is that something in relation to existing infrastructure and buildings that need to be upgraded, or is it just in relation to how we move forward? And I guess my second part of the comment would be, are we meaningfully incorporating the measures that have been suggested through public comment within the EIR, and we're still coming up with not being able to significantly mitigate those measures or those, the impacts?
Well, it's really just that one impact. That's the only thing we cannot demonstrate the ability to reduce to a less than significant level, is that 2050 threshold. Otherwise, all of the most of the comments have been incorporated into the general plan programs, and as I say, have been updated in response to those comments. So, I think that there's a lot of information here. There's a lot of actions the city can take, and really, again, it's just that one issue that our technical specialists could not find a way to demonstrate compliance.
Yeah, understood. Thank you, Stephen. I just want to say I appreciate everyone's hard work. I know this is many years of very detailed work, and we appreciate the efforts that you're putting in.
Thank you.
I want to jump in and echo that, Steve, Barry, Ali, you guys have done a really good job. Having sat through the 2020 and been the chair for that, it was a long, arduous process. And I know what you guys have gone through, and I know the product. I think it looks a little superior from what we put together for 2020, but it's a really solid document. I don't have any comments directly on this evening hillsides or greenhouse gases or whatever, but I just will, it's going to be down the road a little bit, but my only concern from this document is the downtown precise plan and the elevations near the transit center. I think I voted against it back then, but that's my only concern with the document, is that it gives too much height downtown. So that's my overreaching concern, but thank you guys. You guys did a great job. So appreciate it.
Go for it, Commissioner Davidson.
I have a follow-up to the greenhouse gas reduction and the whole climate action plan that the city adopted. I totally understand the necessity of the statement of overriding considerations, because we can't just at this point say that we're going to meet those targets. I get that. As a commissioner reviewing a lot of private development proposals, it has been a bit frustrating not having ordinances in place that gives us the tools to require certain things that address greenhouse gas emissions of developers. And one of the commentators specifically spoke to, why can't we make this mandatory? And it had to do with the organics recycling. So what is stopping council from adopting these ordinances that are already in the climate action plan so that they can be imposed on development? And I think that's an overall sentiment, that we have all these great studies and all these great plans, but they don't turn into ordinances that make it a requirement. And I think if we start adopting ordinances, then in 10 years, half the life of this plan, we then can see if we are going to be close to meeting these targets. But I guess I'm not sure that I have a suggestion. It's more a question for Barry, maybe. Like, how can council get the message that they need to adopt ordinances, so all of these suggestions on the climate action plan start getting implemented and required?
I'm happy to respond. And again, really good question. We have strengthened the language. The composting plan is now mandatory, or the composting ordinances. It was changed from advisory to mandatory. So the big one is the electrification of building systems and moving away from natural gas into electric. And that's something that requires further financial analysis and community conversation. But it is in the general plan as a mandatory action that the council will consider. Whereas previously it was the language was much more general and much vaguer. So we've gone through the specific comments that were submitted and changed the program language in the general plan to make it more proactive. That's not to say it's a done deal and it's just because it says it in the plan, it's going to happen. But it does put it front and center on the council's agenda to act on these things in the coming year or 2, 3 years to take action and to have that conversation with the community about these specific measures. It doesn't get pushed down the road indefinitely. The other thing is updating the climate action plan. I mean, the general plan goes to 2040, the climate action plan goes to 2030. So we don't really have a plan yet for how we're going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from 2030 to 2040. So that's the next step, is moving that needle forward and getting everything in alignment. So those things all need to happen in the future to make it work. I think we agree with what Bill and Bella were saying. I mean, I think it's just a matter of, we don't know for sure that we're going to get there until we have these other things in place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then another thing that makes me nervous, you mentioned that there's like 900 programs identified in this 20-year plan, and I know that every single one of those programs requires staff time and possibly further studies before it can become an ordinance, and that's a big challenge for the city to start implementation, because it's all about staffing and funding.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
go ahead, Barry.
Oh, go ahead, Ali. Go ahead, Ali.
I suggest, the city council does, meet annually to kind of go over goals and objectives for that year. And, part of that is picking out the stuff that's in, our general plan, and, they prioritize like the important things for that year. And we work through those. So it's not, we're not able to take everything on in one year, but we do provide some recommendations to the city council, and the city council weighs what's a priority for that year. And in fact, last week or 2 weeks ago, the city council just adopted the goals and objectives for the coming year. So yeah, there are a lot of programs. There's a 20-year time frame, and the goal is to, year by year, work through those goals and objectives. I don't know if that answers your question, Commissioner Davidson, but.
No, this is great information. Thank you, Ali.
if I could also add, the majority of the measures that are listed, the majority of those programs are ongoing. So we've broken them down into short-term, mid-term, long-term, and ongoing. And most of them are ongoing, meaning they're already underway. They're kind of standard operating procedures for the city. So they're things we're already doing and will continue to do. It's part of the, sort of the culture of the city and the way the city operates. So it is not as overwhelming as it might sound if you look at the number of short-term actions, it's a much smaller and more manageable number.
Any further questions or comments?
Yeah, I guess I want to revisit the edits on the canalways. And I heard Barbara Saltzman's comment. And I guess I want to understand more the intent of deleting that old language, that old sentence from 2020 about making the project economically viable for the property owner. Am I quoting it correctly?
That was something we had added in this plan in September. And so that was not part of General Plan 2020. That was.
Oh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood. I thought that was deleted. It was added.
No, I'm sorry. Let me just clarify. It was not included in the previous in the general plan that was adopted 17 years ago. It wasn't there. That was General Plan 2020. We added it to General Plan 2040, and then we deleted it in the last 9 months as a result of that comment. And the only thing that was deleted was a reference to the development of that site being economically viable. That's all that was deleted. And
okay. So the question I have is, that goes without saying that every property owner and every developer that comes in with a proposal, their bottom line is the most important thing. Like if it's not economically viable for them, the project's not going to move forward. Am I correct?
Yeah, you are. I should also clarify the language that was the economically viable had been suggested by the property owner.
Yes.
They had requested that.
Yes. So I guess, so there is a wetland delineation on that property, and I think it's of absolute importance to not deteriorate the wetlands, but I think it's pretty much understood that they're not the healthiest wetlands around. And I strongly believe, because it's been done in other places, where if you have investment in development or whatever it is you want to do with a property, part of that investment has to be into bringing those wetlands into a more healthy environment. But it doesn't mean that the entire parcel needs to become the way it used to be 100 years ago, which the development and it was great. It was extremely healthy, and I don't know what the intent of this adding the language and deleting the language. But at the end of the day, I don't want to rule out the feasibility of looking into developing this parcel, because there's been identified as a great source of providing affordable housing for a much needed community in San Rafael that could become a very nice housing for the lower income residents. And I don't want to rule out the possibility of doing both things, develop it and enhancing the wetlands. So I just want to make sure that nothing has been done to prevent development on this property. And I don't think this EIR addresses any of the environmental issues. Am I correct? If anything is to happen in that property, you're probably looking into an additional EIR concentrated on that job description.
That's correct. I think what the general plan does, it strikes the balance you're describing. It acknowledges the site can be both a restored wetland and ecosystem and a development, because it's large enough that both things can happen. What it really says is the first thing that needs to happen before any project can move forward is a better inventory of what's there now. And the other thing that we've talked about is some follow-up planning that's going to happen, both through the priority development area designation for Southeast San Rafael and for the sea level rise adaptation plan. This site is really an important part of sea level rise adaptation planning. So that footprint of what is developable and what is wetland will be determined through those processes that haven't started yet, but are coming in the future.
Okay.
Let me just throw out, having been a part of that back in the day. You go down Starkweather Park, there are 2 ponds, okay? And then there's an old San Rafael family that owned almost all that property, all the way down to the Rod and Gun Club. And the discussion was people wanted there to be restored wetlands. And so there was a pretty intense negotiations that went on. How much would be wetlands? How much would be developable? And now we're down to the last block. And I think there's 1 family, maybe 2, that own that property. And they were involved in all the developments all the way down. So I think there's a lot of controversy because the owner at one point, I guess, pumped out water from that to create dry land rather than allow it to be a seasonal wetland. So that aggravated people. And it's been an ongoing conflict. And we're not going to settle it tonight, but that's where the owner wanted to make sure that if he was forced, for the family, I guess now was forced to give up a percentage for wetlands, they would want to have a larger percent and for a viable making money off the remainder. So it's not going to be something we're going to decide. I don't think it's going to be decided at the council level or in the courts, one or the other down the road. But yeah, I know what you mean, Renee. So that's one of the last spots that you can develop like that.
But I think my question is answered, that just the updated language on this EIR does not, I guess, block any of these alternatives. So that's good.
That's correct.
Right. Any other points of discussion? Okay, hearing none, what I'm going to do is just walk down the list for everyone, each commissioner to have an opportunity to give final points, and then we'll go into looking for a motion, and I'll kind of walk us through what that motion needs to look like. So first on the list, Commissioner Davidson.
I don't really have any additional comments. I think I echo previous commissioners' comments on the great job that has been done through this long, arduous process, and the deliverables are. I look forward to working with these reports in the future and making changes in San Rafael. Thank you.
Okay, next, and I know that Commissioner Hoffman, this is probably a bit of a fire hose, but if you have any comments or any thoughts from the little you've seen so far, we'd love to hear them.
I don't have any parting comments or thoughts other than it's an impressive body of work. And I want to echo the thanks that have been offered to everybody who played a major role in developing it.
Commissioner Lubomirsky?
I think it's like I said, it's great. Allie, you don't need to send me a hard copy. Okay, 638 pages. I don't need a hard. I still got the old one that takes up like 2 binders. So I'll just go with the electronic.
The link.
It's all done. All right. Thank you.
Thanks. Commissioner Mercado?
No, I mean, I think it's tough with all the changes going on out of Sacramento. The updates to this, great job to the team, because you're just constantly having to revise it with a lot of ambiguities as to what will happen. I do think when we get to the point of maybe the motion, I want to take a look at the addendum or the additional language that was proposed, because I think I want to make sure we properly identify and deliberate that language against what Sustainable San Rafael raised, just to kind of make sure the spirit is where it is, or where I think the community wants it to be. But overall, no, I mean, great job again. This has been a long process, so thanks for doing so much.
Commissioner Saudi?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and echo really the gratitude we all have for the amount of effort that's been put into this. And it's a really hopeful future for San Rafael and, you know, those of us who have young families and even those of us who are, you know, have been here for a long time. I'm really, you know, feel that we're all putting our best effort to make the best and brightest future for our city. So I like Commissioner Davidson, look forward to using these, you know, this document as a guideline and moving forward with it.
Thanks. Yeah, I think this was, you know, the comments that you guys were able to incorporate. There were, I'm sure you've gotten streams and streams of emails, and after every session, I'm sure you get more. The fact that you've been able to respond to each one of them line by line and incorporate where needed, I mean, that's a very difficult and often thankless task. So I think it's good that you're getting acknowledgement for that. I think the one thing that I'll point out with regards to the greenhouse gases and the climate change action plan, I know that, you know, the general plans often have inherently conflicting elements. I think that was one of the first pieces of introduction that I was given in terms of the general plans. And I think when we look at like economic vitality versus climate change action plan, I think there are some pretty large conflicts between those two things in terms of you know, executing on either one of those. And I know that it's I think it's going to be a challenge that we're going to look at, particularly since we're also in an environment where there are large disparities. And I know that a lot of the focus on environmentalism inherently restricts the ability for those at the bottom end of inequality from actually getting the opportunity to develop at the same level as everybody else. And that realistically, if we want, you know, climate change or, you know, net zero carbon, it's essentially beholden on those who consume the most, which are generally the people that are most wealthy, to reduce their activities, as opposed to trying to impose, let's say, burdensome policy that may negatively impact the ability for others to develop. So that's one thing that I want to be very conscientious of as we kind of look at some of these policies. Now, I know that's a little bit vague, but I think we're going to get into the meat of some of the proposed amendments as we get into our motion and kind of see kind of where that lies with the comments from Sustainable San Rafael. So I think that before we jump into the amendment, Barry, do you want to pull up the two amendments that you posted briefly on the presentation, both the climate change action plan as well as the statement of overriding considerations?
Sure, yeah, and I think just to be clear, we're not acting on the statement of overriding considerations tonight. Okay, so I have there's probably a couple of different documents I'm going to want to highlight here. First is the letter from Sustainable San Rafael. Okay, here's the resolution. Let me go back to the. Okay. So Sustainable San Rafael requested that we add what's here as Clause D to this resolution as one of the findings. And the location where they suggested this be added would not be the location that we would recommend, because it's actually, this section deals specifically with state mandated findings, so you wouldn't include it there. But I think they were amenable to including it elsewhere. But the point is that I mean, I won't read it out loud. I'll just leave it up there for a moment. You can have a look at it, and then I can switch back to the other.
Barry, sorry to interrupt. So what we're seeing right now is the PowerPoint. Is that what you were wanting us to see?
Oh, you're seeing the PowerPoint. I'm sorry. I think I need to stop my screen share to do that. Shoot. Okay. Now, are you seeing Bill's letter?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, I should verify when I put these things up. And let me know when you'd like me to switch back to the PowerPoint or the actual resolution. I don't know that I can get them all on the screen at the same time.
And just for everyone's reference, item D is the language that they're requesting us to add, correct?
That's correct.
Barry, are you able to cut and paste or copy and paste? Or is it a PDF and not easy to do?
This is actually, let me just see. What are you seeing on the screen now? Because is it?
Still the letter, yeah.
You're still seeing the letter. Okay, let me just do this then. Bear with me, thanks. You're witnessing the limitations of my Zoom expertise here, even after 15 months. Okay. Now you should be seeing the comment. This was the finding that had been suggested by Sustainable San Rafael, and this is the language that we were proposing to add. I also want to point out, though, that we will add the language suggested by Sustainable San Rafael to a separate resolution that you're going to consider at the next meeting on the statement of overriding considerations. And you're only considering tonight recommending approval of the final EIR, which is that the city has responded to the comments adequately and the item Steve walked you through earlier. So we will still include a more robust statement per what Bill suggested in the next resolution. What we are proposing to add to the resolution before you tonight is this statement that's at the bottom left, which is basically saying that even though we're finding significant unavoidable impacts, the city is still committed to vigorous implementation of all programs, including its climate action plan programs to reduce GHG emissions.
Mm-hmm. So essentially the resolution that we'd be adopting, or that you're looking at us to adopt, is to essentially adopt the resolution as provided, with including the amendments regarding the climate change action plan as you've listed here on this page, correct?
Yeah, the underlying text would be included in the resolution at the top of, I believe it's the top of page 3.
Okay, any questions from the commission on that?
No, I don't have any questions. I mean, I like it. I think the addition makes sense. I mean, I think you said earlier tonight the climate change action plan is short of the 2040 mark. So there's going to be some interesting updates on that, enabling the community to enter into a discussion about what really the proposed language from Bill identifies, which is sort of more of a detail of the process. I think for what we're proposing tonight, the language that's proposed by staff to me makes more sense. It's broader, it enables that. It's in alignment with what I think we need, which is the idea of intending to look for more ways to implement this. So I wanted, and thank you, Barry, this is exactly what I wanted, just to show the two so we could see that, in essence, there is an intent to meet a higher standard as that comes in at the appropriate time. So I like it, I'm fine with it.
And the key is without locking into a firm financial commitment, without understanding the financial feasibility of various detailed items.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's so many impacts when you make these determinations that I think need to be analyzed. And it may be that they are implemented once the analysis is done. I mean, so to me, we have to make the commitment that that's what we're going to do, to analyze it and then try to make as much of an intent to mitigate sort of the impact of greenhouse gases once all that analysis is done, and weighing out the impacts against the risk of not doing it. So to me, the language proposed by Barry does that. It's saying, okay, we're going to look at that and try to do as much as we can, even though we know this is significant and unavoidable. So to me, that I appreciate that language was brought up tonight as an amendment to the resolution.
All right. If If there are no other comments, at this point, I'll request a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution as submitted with the amendment presented by staff. Where's the amendment going to be?
It's at the top of page 2. Sorry, page 3.
Okay. So with the addition of the amendment to the top of page 3 of the resolution as submitted in tonight's agenda.
Do I have a second?
Commissioner Sadi, I'll second that motion.
All right, any discussion on this?
Ellie, is that motion clear enough? Okay.
Yes.
That was yes? Okay, cool. Okay, at this point, I'll ask the staff to conduct roll call on this motion.
Okay. Commissioner Davidson?
Yes.
Commissioner Haveman?
Yes.
Commissioner Lubomirsky?
Yes.
Commissioner Mercado?
Yes.
Commissioner Saudi?
Yes.
And Chair Samudzi?
Yes. All right, thanks everyone. Next, we'll move into the director's report.
Okay. It's been a while. I want to start just by saying how excited I am that we are going into this, I guess, I'm not sure what you call it, the end of the phases or the final phase of the shelter at home order, and that we can start thinking about reopening and seeing each other in person again, and doing all our daily activities and work activities in person. So as part of that, our city team is looking at, kind of what that reopening plan will look like. And so we're starting to add hours and appointments and that sort of thing for community development specifically. We are now open for walk-in services on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 8:30 to 12:30. And we have expanded our availability by offering appointments on those other days and in the afternoons as well. So that's exciting. Exciting, but also scary, because as you all know, we have lost a number of staff. And so we are really kind of continuing to recruit for some of the staff that we've been looking for a while. Also, some of the frozen positions that we had to kind of figure out how to absorb the last year have been unfrozen. And so we're looking at some of those positions as well. So our housing program person is being advertised right now. We have a homelessness program manager that's being recruited right now, or that we're looking for. We still haven't found a senior planner. What we're doing is, it's been open until filled. We're gonna, kind of open it, extend it, kind of re-advertise it to kind of liven it up again. And then we're gonna open up an assistant planner position. So super excited about the idea of getting some staff on board, especially with the more recent retirement of Paul Jensen. It feels really, really intense right now. We are looking at a planning manager right now. We've been interviewing, so I'm hoping to have somebody on board soon. I'm hoping to get through the interview process and background process in the next coming week. So by the time we meet next, I may have an announcement. So I'm excited about that. The DRB did meet last week as a group, and they had some pretty good projects. 800 Mission came back to them for amendments to the design. The applicants are proposing to increase the height, and they were told to come back with some changes and maybe consideration of reducing the height back to a more reasonable height. So that's going to be coming back to the design review board if they decide to move forward, or they may decide to just continue with pulling their permits.
Ellie, I have a question on that one. Is that, I know they added a floor, right? That was the amendment.
Yes.
Is the DRB, are they recommending to reduce that like the units, or are they just like asking for the plate heights to be lowered?
They asked for the redesign of the 5th floor by adding step backs. They didn't really ask for a reduction, but more of just thinking about how that design might look differently.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Then the other thing that came forward was a project that's been around for a little while. Originally known as Clayton lots, but now known as Ross Street Terrace lots. And this is a lot line adjustment with construction of 2 homes and some pretty significant cuts to accommodate a roadway. And the design review board asked the applicants for some minor design changes, and that'll be coming back again just for a final design review. There was also an application for a conceptual design review for an industrial building at 16 DeLuca Place. So that'll be coming back as a formal design review in the future. So the other thing I wanted to mention is I think you heard earlier today that somebody is going to attend the Marin Municipal Water District Board meeting tonight. One of the topics that's been happening for the past couple of months that we've been hearing about is a possible moratorium on development, and the Water District heard some staff proposals on June 1st. Our mayor, staff also commented on, kind of the unintended consequences of this kind of action, and, asked the Water District to look at other alternatives. And I think, we really want to be good partners. And I think the Water District also wants to be good partners with county and city jurisdictions. And so they are looking at trying to come up with some other solutions. And so I think tonight is an update of what they've come up with, what some of the things that the board asked them to look into, and we'll see what happens in the coming month or so.
So question on that, what would be the duration of said proposed moratorium?
I don't know, I'm not sure. I can find that out and come back next time there was an ordinance, a draft ordinance proposed on June 1st, so there may be something in that would provide us with some more information. So that's it. That's all I have.
And one further question on that. So the moratorium on development, is it specific to, say, net new development and would exclude, say, infill development, or is it just like any development at all?
So what the board asked their staff to do is to kind of come back with a proposal and evaluate provide some options for what that might mean. What we did, staff and our mayor, was ask them to provide some exemptions from that moratorium that included things like affordable housing, ADUs that might, provide some options for ADUs that maybe, if you're swapping out lawn space for an ADU, that might be an acceptable solution. Developments that don't require high water use, applications that have already received building permits. And we were actually asking them to consider applications that have received entitlements, especially with those applications that have gone through a process that may have been, 2 or 3 years. And now we're, reaching this point in time when, a building permit may be sought and they're faced with, kind of another obstacle. So we asked the district to look at, consider some of these exemptions, because for us, there's some, unintended ramifications of imposing a development moratorium. And, we really wanted to make sure that there was some, we asked the board to look at some alternatives that may have more measurable impacts. on water conservation.
Yeah.
So
It's troubling to hear though.
that's a good question.
Out there. It's very troubling.
Oh, yeah, I have a couple questions. The hotel on East Francisco, how is that coming along?
So we have, they're about to submit an application for so their grading work. They've been in touch with us and they're actively working on preparing a proposal or for building permit submittals. I haven't seen that yet. They're actively working on it is what I know.
Okay, and I heard rumor that the city was considering purchasing land underneath the freeway for a development, perhaps. You heard anything about that?
I have not.
4th Street? Yeah, they're gonna.
It was in the IJ this week. Yeah.
Yeah, that was okay. Just
I
curious.
think it's to address the homeless issue, right?
Yeah.
Oh, purchasing land from Caltrans.
Got it.
That's what they're talking about doing.
Yeah, so they can keep everyone in one place so that they can continue to give them like provides access to services. Yeah.
Yeah, I can think of a few better places, but
Allie's going to avoid answering that with everything she can.
I can look into that and provide more.
Well done, Allie. Well played.
Totally.
Rafi would be proud.
Great. That's all I have. How about?
I think congratulations are in order for our new director of the in San Rafael. I'm really proud of you, Ali. It's great. I'm so happy to hear that the city made that decision. I'm looking forward to working with you in whatever capacity to help you with anything I can. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, congratulations, Sally.
Thank you, thank you all. Yeah, I'm very excited. It's going to be a lot of work, and
Yes.
And you know, I mean, Paul's been my hero for so long, so it's kind of a bittersweet,
Yes.
you know, change. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I also have an announcement in case you haven't heard. I am not going to renew my planning commissioner term. So my last meeting will most likely be the June 29th. I have 2 teenagers under the same roof as me and and a 10-year-old, so I need all the time I can to spend with them. And it's been 6 great years. I'm really happy I got this experience and I'm not going anywhere. I think you guys all know where to find me, and I look forward to meeting you in person, Commissioner Huffman.
And myself. We never met him. Oh, I think actually you helped with some DRB meetings.
Yes.
We met in person.
But it's been a long time. Yes.
A while. Yeah. Well,
thank you all. Yeah. It's been a wonderful experience, and I'll have one more meeting with you guys.
Well, can I suggest maybe we have that meeting at the pond? Maybe. They have wheelchair access. We just bring our little laptops. We all just sit together and cause Allie all kinds of trouble. I'm just throwing that out as
that would be great.
I think Ali is gonna try to not answer that question.
Yeah, well, no, but if we all just showed up, that might be incredible. I'm just throwing that out there as being the old guy. What are they gonna do? Kick me out? You know, maybe Tam Commons. You know, who knows? There are a couple places. I'll be in touch with you guys. I'll be in touch.
Commissioner Davidson, I have completely enjoyed working with you and under, you know, as I think I started when you were the chair, and you will definitely be missed.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll second that. I didn't know that you weren't going to renew, but I'm sad to hear. You're awesome to work with. So I hope that's not a firm commitment yet, because why do you want to hang out with teenagers at home?
I know, right?
So much better than that.
This is your safe space right here. We're your buddies. You can be safe.
We won't ignore you. We won't talk back to you.
Maybe we'll meet at the pond farm. How's that? More often.
That's good.
Sure.
I know, and I really do want to also say, in all seriousness, that it's been a pleasure to have your perspective, because it is one that really like is unique. And I think the beauty of the commission that we have is that we all bring something to the table, and you definitely bring something to the table that's, you know, a unique perspective that's super valuable and, you know, gives me pause and allows me to think about, as a new commissioner, how I approach, you know, just reviewing the content that we have to. So I appreciate you working amongst us, and you'll be missed. But maybe you'll stay. I don't know. You might get tired of those teenagers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll
I
second
know.
that. No more updates?
I mean, I guess my wife had a baby.
What?
Oh, awesome. Congratulations.
Just like a no big deal kind of a thing.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Is it a boy or a girl?
The girl this time.
Oh, great.
Nice.
How old is she? How many weeks?
This was just this Friday.
Oh,
Wow,
wow.
look at you. Look, you get 2 weeks off. You didn't have to be here. Wow.
Congratulations,
so
Shinge.
it's pretty good.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
that's so wonderful. And she's doing
Beautiful.
great. She's doing good.
Yeah, she's the chill one, so she just
Oh, good. Good. Yeah.
cry. Nice.
Just in passing, by the way, we just had a baby.
That is so wonderful. My second one is now 6, but I vividly remember just with the second you get to like take it all in and enjoy it, you know?
Yeah.
You know how quickly it's gonna go by, so it's really magical. That's so great.
But the 3-year-old's kind of freaking out though, so I don't know.
This is your second?
Yeah.
Your 3-year-old is gonna want to donate him. You watch.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
Congratulations. Happy for you. I'm happy to hear everyone's healthy.
Yeah, that's the important part. Yeah.
Man, mad respect. You showed up today.
Yeah.
This is my
Well,
little.
this is a phase where they're still
Like my 2 hours
sleeping 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
You know? Exactly. I'm on the clock all the time. So.
Congratulations.
Oh,
Yeah.
can anybody top those news?
Nope.
All right. Anything else?
Nope.
All right then. This meeting is concluded.
Awesome.
Thanks,
See you
everybody.
guys.
Good night, everybody.
Okay, good night.
Sorry. Good night.